I've just learned WordPress myself a few months ago, and I by no means claim to be an expert, but I wanted to kind of capture the things that were difficult for me to discover in my process of getting to know WordPress. I've been publishing things on the internet for decades, but the old-fashioned way, and web publishing has gotten a lot more complicated with the responsive design requirements for cell phones and so forth. And so it's a lot harder to code everything yourself than it used to be. And so in this talk, I want to cover some of the basic things that folks might want to consider today when they want to put some information out on the internet. And WordPress may or may not be the ideal solution depending on your circumstances. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into my next slide. And these 8 topics are kind of the basic points that I'm going to touch on. About 55% of all websites are created with some kind of content management system. So we're going to talk about what a content management system is, and talk about some of the requirements that modern websites need to meet so that they can be found with a search engine. As I mentioned, responsiveness to adapt to different size screens, phones, tablets, and desktops. And this adds a lot of complexity to coding a website that we didn't have to deal with in the early days. So, first of all, a content management system is basically a type of software that is used for managing information that you present through a website. Drupal is more popular than WordPress for large sites that require high performance. It also has a higher learning curve. There are hundreds of different CMS tools out there, but there are a lot of reasons to choose WordPress, which I'm going to touch on in a moment. But first, I found this table of CMS software comparison, and if you'll note in the left, all the little red buttons on the first column is WordPress, in case you're, this is kind of a lot of information for one screen, so depending on your screen, this may be unreadable, but you can go to the link and then zoom in at your own comfort level. But you'll see that a lot of the features in WordPress require plugins, and you can host a WordPress site free at wordpress.com, but you can't install any plugins for free. So that's kind of one of those teaser things to get you to pay a lot of money to host your website with WordPress. I'm curious about WebGUI, the one on the right. It seems to include all the basic functions of a CMS without having to add anything on, and it's completely open source like WordPress. Except that to get a full WordPress site, you need to get extra goodies that you can end up spending money on, and I'm going to touch more on that in a little bit. Okay, I wouldn't pick WordPress just because it's the most popular, but because it is the most popular, you have the best chance of finding somebody else who knows something about it to help you. And that was why I chose WordPress. I found there was a local meetup 10 minutes away from my home where I could talk to WordPress experts and pick their brains. And I'm sure everybody who's active in user groups understands the value of peer support and information sharing. And in my book, that's the #1 reason to use WordPress. And every time I've done this talk, I've gone back to the w3text.com website that tracks the popularity of WordPress, and the numbers keep going up from week to week and month to month. And it's just amazing how fast WordPress has grown just in the last few months. It's now 60.7%. Well, actually, I did this slide a week ago. This number may have gone up again already. 60.7% of all websites that use a content management system use WordPress, and it's almost 34% of all the websites out there. And when I do a Google search on the keyword WordPress at the youtube.com site, I get somewhere between 20 and 39 billion videos. So if you could find the best WordPress tutorial out of those almost 40 billion videos, you'd probably find something even better than my talk, but good luck finding it. Continuing on the reasons to choose WordPress, these are 6 reasons from the WordPress beginner website, and there are a whole lot of websites dedicated to helping you get familiar with WordPress, give you step-by-step instructions for particular tasks that you may want to accomplish with your website. There's a lot of information out there on how to do just about anything. Your search engine is your friend, whether it's Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo. They all will find a tremendous number of tutorials and step-by-step instructions. If you can describe your problem to a search engine, you can generally find a tutorial on how to accomplish something in WordPress. WP Beginner is also an excellent site to introduce yourself to many basics, and I'll be referring to it for details in my talk and other slides. And in some of the articles, I'm going to add some of my own reasons for learning WordPress. It actually can be rather lucrative for people that don't want to take the time to figure out how WordPress works. A lot of people are willing to pay handsomely for a nice looking website, don't realize just how easy it is to do once you've taken some time to learn WordPress, although there are niggly details that for true expertise that takes additional time. This is one of my own reasons for starting with WordPress, is realizing I'm not locked into it. There's a website called CMS to CMS that offers all kinds of help in learning how to migrate your website from one content management system to another. So, for example, if you start out with your website in WordPress and it's growing really fast and you want to see if you can get better performance out of your web server by migrating your WordPress site to Drupal, here's step-by-step instructions on how to do that. And you can follow the links and read on your own what's involved. My main point here is just that it's possible to do that. Okay, there are also some good reasons not to choose WordPress. And I'm going to go into a few more in other slides, but with all the other choices available, the Softaculous auto installer that's part of the cPanel that comes with most hosting service, there's 76 different CMS and portal applications and 16 blogging environments. Obviously, nobody's going to write those things if they don't think they can do something better than what's already out there. So it is worth taking a look around at some of the other options. One of the ones that I listed on my definition slide of what a CMS is was a content management system specifically designed for real estate listings. So I'm guessing if you're a realtor and you want to put all the house listings that you're wanting to advertise out on the web, it'd be a lot faster and easier to use something specifically designed for that narrow focus rather than a general purpose web creator, although I'm sure you can find many real estate themes for WordPress as well and do it that way. But you have a choice, and it's probably a trade-off between how much time you want to spend exploring and whether or not the tools you find do exactly what you want from the get-go. Now, one of the mistakes I made in learning WordPress was I was overwhelmed with all the themes that were out there, and so I just picked one that had most of the features I wanted for my website, and I was working on one that I'm hoping will have some international interest, so built-in support for translation was one of the key features, and using the WordPress tools for sorting themes by features, I came on this theme called Poseidon, and shortly after a few weeks of getting all my information set up with this theme, I discovered that if I wanted to do tweak a lot of the details, I needed to pay $97 to upgrade to the Pro version. And being a bit of a cheapskate and always knowing that there are often free ways to accomplish a goal on the internet, I wasn't happy with that discovery. And so one of the things I want to share from my early experience is that a lot of WordPress themes are really teasers to sell you a more expensive version of the theme, a professional or premium. They have all these different words for we're going to charge you more money. That does, the WordPress search features don't really tell you when you find a free theme if that's the case. And some of the experts in my local WordPress group explained to me that a lot of these teaser themes actually hide or block you from WordPress features that are free in the basic WordPress so that they can charge you to give them back to you in a premium theme. So finding the right theme for your WordPress website is probably the greatest challenge you're going to face. And I haven't got the ideal solutions for that, but I'll share what I've learned in a short period of time. And maybe at the end, folks, if there's anybody in the audience who has some experience with other WordPress themes, I'd be interested in hearing your suggestions, because I'm here to learn as well as share what I've learned. Okay, before you create a WordPress site, you need a place to put it. And most WordPress tutorials will suggest going to a place that costs $6 or $8 a month. A lot of them will have a discount for WordPress users that starts you out at an introductory rate of $2 or $3 a month. Well, about 10 years ago, I created a website for a group. Then my life circumstance changed. I left town, and years later, I noticed that I was paying many hundreds of dollars a year for a website that nobody was using anymore because it was being automatically charged my credit card, and the introductory rate had expired and gone up considerably. So if you're going to be creating a lot of websites, that can add up to big bucks very quickly. So I'm much more excited about lifetime hosting plans that range in the $100 to $200 range. If you want full service and you don't want to shop around a bit, these are fairly easy to find. I have been on a quest for the very best bargains in hosting, and I'm going to talk about some other options that I haven't, some I've tried and some I haven't, that are a lot cheaper than the most common things you're going to find. Early on my search, I looked at Cloud at Cost, which had some really amazing dedicated server deals when they first opened up their business. But unfortunately, their website hosting, even though you can get a small site for a single $2 one-time fee for a 10 gigabyte host with a terabyte of data transfer, turns out they're putting all of these hosting services on one server, and typical load average for a hosting service should be in the 1 to 10 range, and I've seen theirs, and it's typically in the 200 load average range, so it's just ridiculously slow. It can take 5 minutes to load a page if you can ever get it. So that was a disappointment, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But I have a bunch of links to places where you can look for deals. Web hosting is often discounted, and I'm going to talk about one other option. If you're just learning WordPress, is to install WordPress locally on your own computer. The same software that they use in big commercial data centers is available for your PC, Mac, or Linux computer. And I had to play the little video on their website to find out how to pronounce. I thought it would be ZAMP, but they pronounce it SHAMP. I've got links here for tutorials on how to install this, and SHAMP is very easy to install. And I use the Bitnami all-in-one installer for WordPress, and I found it a little confusing. It wanted a bunch of database passwords pre-configured in SHAMP first, and it didn't give me many options about what folder I wanted to call my WordPress install. It just uses WordPress spelled out, and I hate long URLs. The first tutorial suggests installing WordPress manually from the WordPress site, and I think that's probably a better choice. But this works very well, and you're not limited to WordPress. You can install any CMS you want under SHAMP, and so this gives you a good place to experiment with different themes without having to wait for things to install and load remotely, and get your feet wet with WordPress before you actually publish your site. So I highly recommend starting here, which is not what I did, and I spent a lot of time waiting for slow page loads on a cheap server as I was learning WordPress, and this would have sped up my learning process considerably had I done it this way. So I find the most helpful thing is to learn from other people's mistakes when trying out new stuff. So hopefully this will help some folks. And I talked about cloud at cost before, and even though they weren't very good for web hosting, although the prices are too good to be true, they do have a file sharing service, download.cloud@cost, and you don't even have to buy it to use it. You have to specify a number of downloads or a number of days before your file will disappear, but they seem to give you unlimited storage for sharing files. And I know there are a number of other services like this, but a lot of them have a boatload of advertising or other obnoxious features. This works pretty well if you can get by with the file name extensions listed on the slide, which is one of the peculiar limitations to the product. And if you do pay the $2 for, I think that buys you 100 gigabytes of online storage for $2 for life. That's a lot cheaper than most other cloud services, but you kind of get what you pay for. But that worked very well, and also if you buy a business web hosting account, you get unlimited email addresses for your domain, and that can be cheaper than PObox.com and some other alternatives for disposable email addresses. So there were a few things I liked at Cloud at Cost, but their web hosting was not one of them. They did have a very full-featured control panel of all the various web hosting services I've tried. They seem to give you pretty much everything, which a lot of other places don't. So this is a slide I recently added after discussing, sorry about the Freudian slip there, discussing my challenges in finding the best deals in web hosting. I was complaining that the thousands of free hosting services that I remember seeing on the internet a few years back have dwindled to just a few hundred. And pretty much all of those have a gotcha or a hook that you can't really tell from the advertising what's not included that you're going to need. So I started to put together a little spreadsheet, and all the little red blocks are the gotchas, where they don't give you much or they charge extra for something that you really need to publish a website. And you can access my blog at bit.ly/comparefreehosting, and it goes into much more detail on how to find some other sites, and it links to this spreadsheet which has a tab to some of the other sites that list free web hosting services. The www.free-webhost.com is one of the best ones, and its search engine rank is really low, so it is hard to find depending on what search engine. If you search for free web hosting, you're not likely to find that in the first or second search. And so I created my blog as a place for my local WordPress enthusiasts to share their favorite things, and I invite you, if you find a great bargain in web hosting, to post a comment on my blog, and it can be a place where we can share the really good information instead of what people pay to have at the top of the advertising list in search engines. And now the last link here is one that I think is very interesting. This blogger, Chris Titus, who is an IT professional who's done a lot of publishing of how-tos, he has been hosting his own website in the Google Cloud, and he gets, I believe he said it was a 20 gigabyte virtual machine running Linux, on which he's got a virtual server. He can run anything he wants in addition to WordPress, and it typically costs him 1 to 7 cents per month. He said he's been hosting his website for 5 years this way and never paid more than $1 a year for it. And we all know that Google is very good at backup and managing a lot of server installations across the world, and this is a lot cheaper than AWS for hosting. So I haven't had a chance to set this up myself. It is a little complicated. You need to spend some time at the Linux shell running apt-get to install various packages on your virtual machine. But if you're not afraid of the Linux shell, that may be one of the most cost-effective, well-supported ways to host a website for cheap. Chris says that he believes that a lot of these hosting companies are actually just putting your stuff on Google's cloud and then charging you 100 times what they're paying Google to do it. So that may be one of the best gems. I haven't tested it myself. When I do, I will place a review in my spreadsheet and share that with others that way. One of the easiest free commercial services to use is 000 Web Host. I have a site there, and I haven't linked it to a domain name yet, so it's got this weird URL that starts with app-153.982.7907. That's the subdomain that was free with the free web hosting. And the only problem, if you look in the lower left corner of the slide where it says this tab is injected on all free pages powered by 000 Web Host, they say there are no ads, and they call that little tab a branding. I call it an ad, but it's only one ad, which isn't bad. And using a little bit of JavaScript, which is another thing that I like playing with, those 2 lines of JavaScript that I wrote, and I'll be honest, I didn't write much of it. Mostly it's cut and paste from W3 School's JavaScript tutorials. That will remove that little banner from the end of the page. So They'll modify every page you put on their site, and if you include that little bit of JavaScript, you can easily remove it. For simplicity, I give you a 2-line example here on how to remove that ad if you want to use 000 web host, which is pretty decent. You get a gigabyte of disk space and plenty of bandwidth, which should be plenty adequate for most typical small group websites. To be a little more fair to the hosting provider, I would add a little timer to the JavaScript code to leave their ad up for 5 or 10 seconds before making it go away, so that your website is nice and clean and the whole screen is available for you to do what you want to do with your site. I give an example. The toggle div web page is a simple little hello world HTML page where you can just click a button to make that little div appear and disappear. So for anybody who's not familiar with JavaScript code, I give you a nice little example. And once you take care of that banner ad, this free hosting service is one of the most highly rated in reviews. And if you want a place to plop an initial website at no cost, this is great. And you know, I wish this was available when I did my club site years ago. It would have saved me probably about $600. And it's great for one-off websites where you're advertising a few local events or something. All right. One of the other issues when you want to publish a website is purchasing a domain name. And I used a web hosting provider from shareware on sale called Arch Hosting. And when you register a domain with them, it is public, and you have to submit a support ticket to turn it private. So I did that. And just in the few hours between when I created the domain with that hosting provider and the time that they processed the ticket to make it private, I got on a bazillion spam lists, and I was getting emails and phone calls and letters in the mail for months after registering a domain name from all the people that wanted to design and build my website for me and charge me a pretty penny to dump my information into a WordPress template and spit it back at me. So I was rather unhappy with that. And so in the future, I'm going to register my domains with a provider that will give me privacy from the get-go. And I've transferred my domain name to Freenom, which if you look at the little chart at the bottom of the page, I like the first column. These 2-letter top-level domains, TK, ML, GA, CF, and GQ, are completely free. They're free to register, they're free to renew, and they're free to transfer. Now, obviously, if you're a big company, you want the prestigious .com domain, and I do own one .com domain, and our Arch Hosting wanted about $12 a year to maintain that domain name for me, and I transferred it to Freenom, and I'm paying $8.38. And I think with there was a little tax or a fee on it, it added another 30 or 40 cents, so it was like $8.70 a year total. And I'm pretty happy with that. I think it's the lowest price you can find anywhere. Network Solutions is one of the premier providers, and I cut and paste some of the information from their website on why you want private registration. And I quite agree that that is extremely important these days. Namecheap, NameSilo, GoDaddy, they're some of the other popular providers, but I have not seen any pricing that compares with Freenom, and I'm pretty happy with their service. I've got about 5 domains registered with them right now, and everything's working pretty well. Now, depending on what kind of information you want to publish on the internet, you might not need to purchase a domain at all. Most hosting providers provide subdomains, and for a long time this worked really well. I bought 3 websites at clouded cost before I realized their servers were too low to make them actually usable. And I have 1 and 2 cloudedcostsite.com just for testing purposes, for trying out, experimenting with different website configurations. The downsides to subdomains is with Google requiring SSL encryption on all websites, it's much harder to set up your certificates to work properly with a subdomain because the certificates are usually good for an entire domain, and so you'll get errors about sites not being secure when you use subdomains. So if you're concerned about SEO, search engine optimization, subdomains are no longer practical. If you just want to get a page out there and you don't care if your viewers of your website get a little, this page is not secure, subdomains still work fine. And then the other thing is if you just want to publish some information like a Google Sheet or a Google Doc, and doesn't really need to be in HTML format, a URL shortener is a great way to provide a link. For example, at tinyurl.com/mscmobile, I have that points to a Google Sheet I put together comparing the lowest cost mobile phone service that's available in the United States. And just like my web hosting spreadsheet, it's got a lot of information helping to find the best deal, which I have a passion for. Empowering people and getting the most for your money is one of the ways I think people can be empowered. And there are all kinds of URL shorteners out there. I'm sure you've heard of tinyurl or Bitly. The alternative to .net site, which I enjoy for looking at all kinds of stuff, lists a lot of alternatives to tinyurl, including this one, Shady URL, which I got a chuckle out of, that says their motto is, "Don't just shorten your URL, make it suspicious and frightening." Well, that's humorous, but I really don't want to encourage people to click on suspicious and frightening links with all the scams that are out there. But I did get quite a chuckle when I ran across that in my search for other URL shorteners. All right. And just for a little comic relief, I found this blog at boardpanda.com that lists a lot of domain names that you can see for yourself read not quite as they were intended. So the moral of this story is put a dash in your domain name when it may be ambiguous. Okay, now we're going to start to get into some of the more WordPress specific information on creating a website. WordPress has got its own jargon, and I'm going to highlight some of the key ones just to get you familiar with some of the things you're going to encounter when learning to set up a WordPress site. WordPress organizes posts with categories and tags, and they have very specific meanings. And I'm going to refer you to the WordPerfect Beginner website for the details and definitions on those. They have a very nice glossary on their website, which I recommend reading through to get a more detailed introduction than I'm going to take time for here, because we are limited time-wise. But slugs and permalinks allow you to have nice friendly URLs for your blog posts or pages. Shortcode allows you to call a function instead of having complicated HTML for embedding a video on your site. For example, you can use the video shortcode to embed a video on a website. So it makes the coding a lot simpler when you want to call functions in WordPress. So shortcodes are used a lot. I'm told they're being phased out. I'm not sure how those functions will work in the future, but for the moment, a lot of the feature enhancements of WordPress are done through shortcodes. I've already talked a little bit about themes. There's also something called a theme framework, which refers to a code library that is used to facilitate development of a theme. And I thought the lack of good, really free themes might be addressed by finding a theme framework, but the learning curve with those, and many of them are rather expensive, that was not the solution to finding the best themes that I had hoped for. Now, one of the things that really made me a WordPress fan was the first time I saw the WordPress dashboard. If you install a security plugin, which I'm going to talk to in a little bit, you can see the IP addresses in a handy section of the WordPress dashboard that might be making too many login attempts at your website, and other common things for managing the website in a handy dashboard. And pretty much everything you do with WordPress is done in the dashboard. Just clicking on all the menu items on the left is sufficient to find most of the common things. The Pages menu on the left is used for creating web pages and posts, and I'm sorry, there's a separate one for posts. There are a few things, though, that I have trouble finding in the dashboard, so I'm just going to highlight those and leave it to you to explore on your own, because there's not time in 1 hour to cover everything there is to know about WordPress and why you would or wouldn't want to be using WordPress in the first place, which is kind of the primary intent of my slides, is not just WordPress itself, but how to accomplish your goal, whether WordPress is the best tool or not. So one of the things that I keep forgetting where to find is simply the preferences for the dashboard yourself. Logically, to me, I would think I would find it under settings, but it's under users, because the profile settings for your dashboard are for the admin user, or whatever you named the admin account that's managing your WordPress site, and then under your profile. So if you like a different color dashboard panel on the left, you go to users, your profile, and you can set these various options, including whether you want to use a visual editor when writing your code, and whether or not you want syntax highlighting, etc. Now, pretty much, for myself, I'm perfectly happy with the themes at Blogger or blogspot.com, websites like that let you just create a blog instantly. They're free. You don't have to worry about buying hosting and all that stuff. So I'm usually not using WordPress to create a blog. Now, if you're a professional blogger, you might want a lot more control over the appearance of your blog site, and then WordPress is an excellent choice for that. However, one of the first things I want to do when creating a website, and I did this with my first website, and then a few weeks later, I couldn't remember where it was. And it's under Settings Reading that allows you to change your WordPress site. So instead of looking like a blog, it looks more like a regular website with web pages rather than blog entries. And so these are the 4 steps. You find the reading menu under Settings. You select the static page button, and then you select the page that you've created. And I used Home or Welcome the first time I did this, because I hadn't found the tutorial on how to do this at websitebuilding.com, which I reference in the lower right, that told me that the home or welcome page names have special functions in WordPress, and you're better off using a different name for your landing page that you want people to see when they first pop into your site. So those are two little things that are a little hard to find in the dashboard. Most of the rest is pretty much self-explanatory. So I'm going to refer you to a number of tutorials for all the step-to-steps that, like I said, there's between 20 and 40 billion tutorials on the details, and the details are going to be different based on the choices you make for hosting and what theme and other tools you choose to use with WordPress. And so I really can't show you in a short period of time all the different ways you can put a WordPress site together, because it's going to depend a lot on the choices you make for how you want your site to look and what tools you want to plug into WordPress. These were some of the first tutorials that I looked at, and they show how in 20 to 30 minutes you can put a pretty nice website together using the Ocean WP theme and the Elementor layout plugin. And the tutorials both start with how to install WordPress on a commercial provider like HostGator, and I don't recommend using HostGator for the web hosting provider. So these URLs skip over that part and go right into where you've got a WordPress site set up. WordPress install is trivial, straightforward. You pretty much just follow the prompts. These tutorials not only show you the basic step-by-step how to create a website in a fairly short period of time, another 20 to 40 minutes, but it also shows you some of the excellent theme template libraries that are available for particular WordPress themes.
Mark, just a reminder, we got about 10 minutes left.
All right, thank you. I got to speed up a little bit. Just like the Poseidon theme, Ocean WP has got a lot of extras that you can spend a lot of money on, and so that's one of the downsides to committing to a theme like that. And Elementor is one of the most popular drag and drop page builders for WordPress, and most people that do WordPress sites use Elementor. And if you're a professional WordPress developer, it's probably worth the $200 a year to use. But there are many alternatives. Elementor is just one of many page builders. And for example, there's a review here of 22 of the best of them. And here's some screenshots and links that you can use to compare some of the alternatives. Now, WordPress version 5 came out just a few months ago, and they have their own new page builder that's much more GUI than the old one, and it's called Gutenberg. And with every release of WordPress, the built-in page builder that comes with WordPress is getting more and more powerful. I don't think they're ever going to catch up with Elementor and some of the ones that have been doing it for a long time, but you can do more and more right in plain vanilla WordPress itself. Okay, I just wanted to review a few of the plugins. Maintenance mode is a handy one. WordPress is set up so that when you make changes, you can put the site in maintenance mode and people see this site is undergoing maintenance, come back later kind of message. When you're creating a new site, you can actually install this plugin and get a fancy little sign up to be notified when my site goes online. And it's all pre-configured and for free. You can plug this in. There are a lot of security plugins. Here's one that just monitors your login attempts and blocks IP addresses after maximum failed logins to your WordPress admin account. Updraft Plus is probably the most popular free backup plugin, and if you've been doing anything with computers for any length of time, you probably know the importance of backups. So I'll just say this is the one that you want to install to back up your site if you don't have another choice that you have a different reason. This is the one I'm using, and most people in my WordPress group are using Updraft. That's good enough for me. WP Migrate is definitely a tool for WordPress aficionados who may be hosting a similar site in multiple locations or helping people move their site from one place to another. You have to be able to tweak the specifics to a particular site, like the database name for WordPress and so forth. And this allows you to copy the database with a global search and replace on those particulars that may vary from site to site. So this is a very handy plugin. And then, of course, security. Here's some reviews of the top 10 security plugins. WordFence is the most popular, and I like it because it has the most useful dashboard overview. Security, according to the reviews, gives you the most for free. And in my experience, it generates a lot of nagging emails whenever I make legitimate changes to my site. So it's not ideal, but those are some of the most, Security and WordFence are some of the most popular WordPress plugins. There's a whole lot of other tutorials and how-tos out there. This is one I particularly like that compares the Astra and Ocean WP theme. The person who did this video tutorial put the very same website online with the two different themes, and it's a really great way to see how much difference a theme makes, because you see the same data in two different themes and compares and contrasts the various features available in each theme. So I found that very useful. And then the last topic, I want to mention the GDPR, which is the European General Data Protection Regulation. And this, you know, a lot of websites, you've seen the little notices that this site uses cookies, agree to that. Well, that's part of the European regulations. And pretty much every major website has a privacy policy now, and this is a requirement of the GDPR. And you can no longer have your forms default to subscribing people to your email list. People have to actually check the box to turn on a subscription. Those are some of the GDPR requirements in a nutshell, but it's far more complicated than that. And all these fancy graphics are from various companies whose whole business is to sell services to big companies to make their websites GDPR compliant. And I put this slide together last January, and within a couple days, Google got hit with one of the first big fines, $57 million for not making their sites GDPR compliant in time. And so the upside to that is the EU is not, they don't take their regulations lightly. They are really going after website providers that don't take people's privacy seriously. So I've seen some websites in the United States that simply geo-block Europe and say, if you go to our website from Europe, you're guilty of unauthorized computer access, and that's how they get around the GDPR compliance. I found a lot of interesting links as I was putting this talk together, and this is a catch-all. Because of time constraints, I'm not going to go into them, but here's a few other things you might want to know about if you're getting serious about WordPress. And now I think I'm ready for questions.
Yeah, we got about 3 minutes. The one quick question here I'm on, is what are the pros and cons of using the same company for web development and hosting?
I just had to think about that for a second.
If you want to thank and pass, we can just send
Simply
him
a
an
matter
email.
of convenience. Obviously, if they're doing your web development, they're going to be most familiar with the services that they also provide for hosting, and will optimize what they provide to you to work well in that hosting environment. Hosting environments are pretty standard, so I wouldn't think that would be a major concern. I wouldn't myself worry too much about that, but if you're, for example, if you're working for a Fortune 500 company, you probably want a hosting provider that's very scalable, like, I forget the name of the one that was in one of my earlier slides. That was one of the more expensive ones that offers free websites for development. But yeah, that's about all I think I could say about that.
Okay. Can you import a website created by another program into WordPress and then edit it in WordPress?
Not easily. If you created it in another content management system, most content management systems use an SQL database to store all the blocks of text on your website and images, etc. And you can use a website like CMS to CMS to convert. But if you wrote a website in straight code, that would be much more difficult to move to WordPress.
Okay, and the last question for today, WordPress is commonly used, and it's also one of the most commonly attacked. What about the security of the website?
Well, one of the things I forgot to mention is that probably the most common thing you're going to do in your WordPress dashboard is update all your plugins and update WordPress itself on a regular basis. As security flaws are found and fixed, they're pretty fast at getting updates out to help keep your website secure. And I don't know anybody who runs a WordPress website that doesn't use at least one of the available security plugins to help monitor and protect your site.